Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 30th of June 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. That is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Heroes of Might and Magic 5: Tribes of the East. I'm playing this for a little bit so I can do a good comparison to Hero 6, which I have the beta of. I'm just waiting until I've played enough of it to really give you a good impression. Heroes is actually one of my favorite series of all time, so I don't want to rush it. Also, Heroes 5 is really, really good. Anyone that says otherwise is a dirty, filthy liar. Well, to be fair, there were arguments about the story being terrible, but you know what? I've never played Heroes games for the story. I always just play randomly generated maps. It's awesome. That's all I've ever done since Home 2, and I love it. First email comes in from Justin that says, I have noticed a rather odd thing as of late in some recent gaming discussions on the subject of GG. While most people who take part in these conversations tend to agree that it's a sign of respect to your opponents, there seems to be a growing number of people who are taking it as an insult rather than a good gesture. For instance, they say they got beaten horribly and their opponent goes GG, but they themselves will not GG because they did not believe it to be a good game. Personally, even if you get trounced soundly, you should GG out of courtesy and politeness, yet this new group seems to be rather troubling. So what are your thoughts on the matter? Are people truly moving GG towards a more negative light, or are they just being insufferable morons? Bit of column A and bit of column B in that, as far as I am concerned. Offensive GGing is what you're talking about, and that is when the person that's won GGs before the other guy. This is very, very common in games like, say, League of Legends, where at the end of a game, when you've actually got that screen up, you will say GG. In StarCraft 2, it's kind of different, because what happens is, once you leave the game, that ends the game entirely, whereas in League of Legends, you get like a 10 to 15 second animation at the end that says victory and all that stuff, so you have time to say good game at the end of it. In StarCraft 2, you don't, so what tends to happen is the proper way of GGing. I don't believe this is actually etiquette, but I suppose it kind of makes sense. The proper way to GG is for the person that lost to GG and then leave the game, and GG is a sign of surrender, effectively. That's what it is. So if I turn around and say to someone when I'm winning the game, when I'm about to win, GG, that is an offensive GG, and people don't actually like that very much. I think the problem with GG, more so than anything, is that people refuse to actually use it, even if they have lost the game. This happens a lot in League of Legends, an awful lot. You go into solo ladder and you play a game, you'll pretty much see in every single solo ladder, someone will use BG, you know, they'll say bad game, and then they'll go on to explain how terrible their team was. It's like, we don't want to know. It's like, you've got to make excuses. It's actually a very, very rude thing to do, not only to your own team, but to your opponents, because what you're basically saying is that there was no way you would have won unless I was teamed up with the esports equivalent of a bunch of beleaguered manatees. So that's really offensive to everyone, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, for God's sake, suck it up. You lost the game, just say, hey, good game, well played, and just leave. That's all you need to do. You don't need to try and justify yourself to random people on the internet that you'll probably never meet in the queue again. It's so dumb as well, because it makes you look like an idiot. It makes you look like a sore loser. That's what you are. It's not impressive in any way, shape, or form. I personally could not care less if you had a bad team. Do you think I care? I can see how good your team was or how bad your team was by playing against you. It's as simple as that. And if I just trounced you, then yes, your team was bad. You don't need to explain everything that went wrong. I don't care! I won the game! You lost the game. Deal with it, for God's sake. It is really insufferable, and honestly, I would expect it from children, but it's not just kids. In fact, more often than not, it is adults, fully grown adults doing this. For God's sake, grow up. Really, it's a video game. We don't need to get that upset over it. This one comes in from Defrost, who says, I was arguing today with some friends, oh how dare you, them being console gamers and I being a PC gamer, about how Natal, I still refuse to call it Connect. Why? Natal is a terrible name. Sounds like a brand of bioactive yogurt. Whatever the case. And Move were going to influence the lifespan of the current generation of consoles. Personally, I think the new peripherals were just a way for Microsoft and Sony to make more money with outdated hardware, which bring the quality of some modern games down for us PC gamers. For example, Crysis 2, which just got its official DirectX 11 patch not long ago. My friends were arguing that the new peripherals were going to bring a whole new life to consoles, and like the original Xbox and PS1, just needed time for the devs to implement them into games, or even make games for the peripherals. My reply was that the Wii fanboys fanboy said the same thing, but it never happened. And that, at the moment, the peripherals are just being used as a gimmick. For example, Mass Effect 3, which is going to use Kinect with voice commands. Why couldn't they just do that with a regular microphone? Since you've got all three consoles and a godly PC, what is your opinion on companies trying to extend the life of their consoles with peripherals? Or is it just a gimmick like the iToy for the PS2? Or do you think it's going to bring new life into outdated machines, which just doesn't let the developers go to their full potential? It's not going to bring new life in the way that you want it, or that I want it. The idea that this is to extend the lifespan of the machine is true, but only to a point. It's a revolving door style of extending the lifespan. Basically, they are abandoning core gamers, for the most part, in favor of bringing in new casual blood. This is the point. They want more of these machines in more people's homes so they can sell more games. This doesn't help gamers in any way, shape, or form, with the exception of the Move if you happen to be someone like me, for instance, that really dislikes playing shooters with a pad. For instance, Killzone 3 with the Move and SOCOM 4 and things like that are very good. Extremely good, in fact. I am a big fan of them, and I will buy more FPS on console as a result of the Move, but the Kinect, for instance, offers literally no reason for me to pick up anything new for the 360. I don't own a Kinect because I don't see the point. There is nothing on the Kinect that is useful to me or enjoyable to me in any way, shape, or form, and those kind of games simply are not entertaining to me. They are entertaining to a new casual market. So yes, it extends the lifespan of the console because it brings new people into the console world at a later time. Their expectations are lower, and generally speaking, we're talking about people that don't care about graphical fidelity. And that's the thing. They're extending the lifespan of the console not by improving the console, but by lowering the common denominator of people that actually play on it in terms of their expectations. These kind of tools do not allow developers to suddenly unlock the true potential of the console. They don't. You could do the same thing with the Move as you can with the controller. It's kind of nice to offer it as an alternative, but in general, you can do the same thing. It's the reason why most Wii games actually offer multiple methods of control. It demonstrates that the vast majority of Wii games could be played with a normal controller, and more often than not, they are. FPS can be played with a pad. Racing games can be played with a pad. You don't need to turn your hands around like a fool or whatever. So, I don't see these extending the lifespan for us as gamers at all. The machines are old, the machines need a refresh in terms of the hardware. Thankfully, Nintendo is doing that. We've seen that the Wii U is very powerful. We learned recently that the tech demo that was on the floor for Zelda is actually running on the Wii hardware and will be part of the Zelda title, and that is stuff that the consoles at the moment cannot do, so it is powerful, and I'm hoping at least Nintendo will give Microsoft and Sony a prod just to move forward. Either that, or developers simply have to start making PC games that much better. I don't know, I mean, maybe it's a possibility that if Xbox 360 and PS3 remain in their current states on the market for this length of time, then developers will eventually turn around and say, you know what, there's a potential to actually bring these people who are really after some high-fidelity graphics to the PC. And people are buying better and better television devices, they're buying better and better sound devices, and yet their gaming system is not keeping up with that. I mean, for God's sake, most people who buy an HDTV these days buy a 1080p television, and yet a lot of these games for the 360 and PS3 are still being rendered at 720p and then upscaled. That's pretty bad. I mean, running anything at 720p on a modern PC is pretty awful. I mean, you know, I've got a laptop that runs at 1080p natively, and it just doesn't care. My machine runs at 2560 by 1600 natively. So, to me, 720p is for recording only. That's the only reason I have 720p on, because it's just easier to record that way. I game at 2560 or 1600, and 1080p at the very minimum. So I would hope that developers will get this into their heads that maybe some of these hardcore guys can be coaxed back to the PC if they provide a sufficiently high-fidelity experience in comparison to console. If you're just going to lazily port it, then no, people are just going to stick around on consoles. And I don't know if developers really want people to move back to PC. Maybe it's good for them to stay on consoles. Maybe it's just easier that way. So I think we've got a long way to go before the PC comes back to the forefront as a platform. And that's not the fault of the PC as a platform itself. It's the fault of the developers. This one comes in from Zed that says, I was wondering what your opinion on games using a checkpoint save system, such as Fear 3 or the new Duke game, instead of a save file system, such as Dragon Age or The Witcher. Does this come back to being a console issue again, or is it a genre issue, FPS versus RPG? What am I missing? Why do I find myself being unable to use F5 lately? Any insight you could offer would be most welcome. It's really difficult to say without going heavily into the developer side of things. If I were to hazard a guess, it comes down to control once again, because with a checkpoint save system, what you can do as a developer is identify what a player's going to have at any given point. Yeah? And if they restart from a checkpoint, you will have a good idea as to how much ammo they have. You'll know they're on full health because, of course, it's a regenerating health system, and that's the only thing I can really think of. I mean, it's not like consoles are incapable of doing this. Not at all. They're more than capable of having multiple save files. For God's sake, my PS3 has, what, 160 gig hard drive in it? Hell, I think my 360's got more than that. It's one of the new Slims, but whatever the case, if you have the capacity, it's not a problem, and the machine is more than capable of doing it. Maybe it comes down once again to interface issues, but still, I still think there should be automatic saving, and then there should be an option to save anywhere. There are certain arguments that having a checkpoint within a game as opposed to the ability to save anywhere does help it out an awful lot. It does make things seem a little bit more dangerous. For instance, if you can save every 5 seconds, then that's a bit of a problem. The thing is, in my opinion, there should just be a timer on it. Because the ability to save anywhere is more of a convenience thing than anything else. I want to be able to save, and then I want to be able to just get started from where I left off if I have to go and get something done. I'd like to give an absolutely horrendous example, by the way. The single-player mode of Mortal Kombat on the PS3. In that game, it has an auto-save checkpoint feature, and you might think, oh, it's a fighting game, that's fine. But it's not. Because every time I load up, and I haven't got around to beating the final guy yet, obviously the final battle, I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't done it, but there's a massive, stonking cutscene before that, and you can't skip it. And it's really annoying. This actually happened in multiple cases because there's a lot of cutscenes in that game. So, it's like, why can't I just save at the start of the battle or something? Why is that? And it doesn't really apply all that well to the scenario in question, simply because it's a fighting game, and saving in the middle of a fight would be really weird, but you get what I'm talking about. Saving is a convenience thing. If you want to prevent multiple saves over and over again, you can do that. You can limit the number of saves on a particular level, if you like. You can combine it with checkpoints. You can put a cooldown timer on it to make sure people don't just spam it over and over again. There are plenty of options available there, as far as I'm concerned, that would still maintain the danger of having to go from checkpoint to checkpoint and not having a safety net of being able to save wherever you want. And if you have checkpoint saves as well on top of that, you make sure that if the player has saved in a stupid situation, like say he's falling down a pit, then he can then go back to a checkpoint save if he needs to. That's fine. If he's saved in a dumb place and he's made his position untenable, then yes, he can revert back to a checkpoint save. I don't know, it's a difficult thing to talk about. The design philosophy behind save states doesn't seem to be discussed all that often by developers, and I really don't actually know what their logic is a lot of the time. I don't know if it's just easier to have checkpoints, or if it's down to an interface problem with the console not having a button for saving, and they don't want you to press start to go then select save, then select your save file and stuff like that. Or whether it's all down to control, or whether it's down to the fact that they want to make sure that you have to get through a certain part of the game without dying, and maybe it is a result of regenerating health, actually. Maybe that's got something to do with it, simply because they know that you can regenerate at any time, so their way of giving you a challenge is basically for you to have an endurance of going from one place to another. But even that doesn't make a lot of sense, simply because if you get out of an encounter, you get back up to full health anyway. Hell, save files were actually more of a pain in the ass when you had a enduring, persistent health system. Because you could save, and you could end up saving when you had like 5 HP, and I'm like, oh god, what am I going to do? You have to restart the level and things like that. But it is a difficult discussion, because the philosophy behind it is so unclear. And of course, if you want to discuss it, well, there's a comment section down there. Use it for something useful, as opposed to first, and oh my god, why is this video stuck on 300 views with 1,000 likes? Derpity derp. Okay, right, so there is a Steam sale going on, folks, and I'm going to pop these on the end of every mailbox, by the way, just to give you guys some recommendations. I'm not going to make full videos on these. Over the weekend, I might throw together some really short ones, but the ones that I did last time took ages, and I don't have the time. So I'm going to run down the Steam sales, the daily deals, and remember, folks, if there's a game you want and it's not on the daily sale, do not buy it until the last day. The reason is because it might go on daily sale, it might be further discounted, so do be careful. Okay, today's deals on Steam. Medal of Honor for PC is 66% off. It's a bad game, don't buy it. The single player is awful, it has a very, very narrow field of view, it doesn't run very well. It is incredibly linear Call of Duty clone, and the multiplayer is effectively dead, so avoid like the plague. Test Drive Unlimited 2 is 75% off. That's actually a very good price for what is a rather unique car racing / posing game. If you like the idea of having a penthouse and having a collection of cars and customizing them and driving around picking up women and getting new suits and things like that, then it's pretty good. The driving model is kind of entertaining. Admittedly, the start is absolutely absurd, but it's sufficiently unique to justify purchase, and it actually runs pretty well now. Admittedly, it's all done through a persistent system online, so if you have problems with your internet connection, you might not want to bother with it. And of course, it does have multiplayer that you can just jump in and jump out of very easily, so it's a pretty good racer. I'm kind of a fan of it, and it does have some innovation in it. Lead and Gold, 85% off. That makes it incredibly cheap. For that price, it's really worth just picking it up, because it is a good class-based third-person multiplayer Western shooter by Fat Shark. Yes, indeed, those are the guys who brought you Hamilton's Great Adventure. It is a fun game, and I would recommend that you check it out, especially for that price. Dawn of War 2 Retribution, 50% off. It's good, for the most part. The single player is not quite as good as I hoped it would be, but it's pretty solid nonetheless. There is plenty of content there if you like the single player stuff. Admittedly, it can get somewhat repetitive. I enjoyed it an awful lot. It's pretty much a mixture of an RTS with some RPG elements in the single player, and as you've seen on my channel, the multiplayer for the game is pretty damn solid, so I would recommend giving it a crack at that price. Admittedly, it could go lower. It's not as cheap as I would have liked, but it is a fairly recent release. Borderlands Game of the Year Edition, 75% off. If you haven't played Borderlands, now is a great time to do it, because it is a very good game. Remember to get the advanced configuration tool. Just look around the internet for it. It's very easy to find. Look on the Borderlands forums, because the game is not a great PC port, but modders were able to fix it for the most part. So if you get that launcher, you should be all fine and dandy. I would increase the field of view personally and deal with the mouse acceleration and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a good, fun game, especially in co-op. Recettear, or Recettear, whichever you prefer, 75% off. This would probably be my pick of the entire lot. Recettear is a very, very unique game. It's a sort of cutesy Japanese RPG where you run an item shop in an RPG world. So it's a bit of a role reversal going on right there. You go into dungeons with heroes in order to collect items to sell in your shop to other heroes, and it's got a great sense of humor. It's a really awesome conversion, and I would highly recommend picking it up because it is very unique. You won't find anything else like that. Back to the Future the game. It's by Telltale. If you like point and clicks, you should probably pick it up. I don't know anything else about it because I don't like point and clicks, so I didn't play that. The Witcher 2, 33% off that one. The Witcher 2 is absolutely astonishing, and so far is one of the best RPGs I've ever played. It is incredibly good, and it is a bit of a hog on the processor, I have to say. It will kick the ass of your machine, but it is one of the, if not the best-looking game you will ever see, and it is an absolutely stellar example of PC gaming done right. If you haven't already got it, this is a perfect time to pick it up. You get a discount off a game that's only really been out for, what, a month and a half or so. Well worthwhile. Bit Trip Runner and Bit Trip Beat. Very, very cheap. I've heard some very good things. I don't really know about the game all that much. I believe there's some kind of platformers combined with a rhythm game. I have heard a lot of very good things. They're probably worth a poke considering the price. Blood Bowl Legendary Edition, 66% off. This is a very, very faithful conversion of the Blood Bowl game, and by Blood Bowl I'm talking about the one that was played, of course, on a table. It was the tabletop with fantasy football teams of undead, elves, orcs, goblins, all sorts of stuff like that. It's got a lot of content in it, it's got a lot of teams in it, it's a very faithful conversion to the point where it will probably frustrate you because it's incredibly unfair. But it does have a healthy online community, and it's got a lot of content there. If you've never played Blood Bowl before, it's probably worth a look because it is highly compelling if you get into it, but I can guarantee no game will make you rage this much. Seriously, if you roll some bad dice and your star player falls over and dies that you've been investing hours upon hours upon hours into, you will throw your monitor through the wall. Seriously, that damn hard. Oh god. Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the Game of the Year edition, 66% off. If you've never played Oblivion, it's definitely worthwhile if you want to pick up some mods for it. Admittedly, expect to spend more time modding the game than actually playing the damn thing. I liked Oblivion an awful lot regardless of its problems. It is very, very good with several mods, and there are plenty of guides on the internet as to the best mods, so just Google them. If you haven't played it and you're looking for something to sink a lot of time into, Oblivion is a good bet. And Operation Flashpoint Red River. It's not particularly great, unfortunately. It's 35% off. I didn't enjoy it very much. It's a 4-player sort of squad-based, I say tactical shooter, but it's not even a candle on Operation Flashpoint, the original. It really is sort of codified, if you want to call it that. I was not a fan. I really don't recommend it, especially not for that price. Maybe if it gets a lot cheaper and you can get some friends to play it with you, but otherwise, pass on it and look at Arma 2 instead if you want something that's genuinely tactical and has a very unique multiplayer experience. As it stands, Flashpoint is very generic. And I believe that covers all of the daily deals, folks. Thank you very much for watching the show. Email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with topics for future broadcasts. I'll see you next time.